Well, we're in the beautiful old Willson House, registered historic site here in Red Deer. One of the most beautiful old houses still standing in Red Deer. Actually, the history of this area goes back to the turn of the last century. In 1900, Red Deer was a town of 300. And by 1913, when it became a city, we went through very rapid growth, and the population jumped from 300 to 3,000. The developers who owned this land, which was Edward Michener and his partner Stan Carskellen with the firm Michener Carskellen, this was such an attractive area, they decided to build their personal homes up on the area. Micheners were literally across the street, and Carskellens were up in the corner of the hill where the legislature was supposed to go. The house was built for $3,500. And to put that into context of how much is that, you could buy a reasonably good house in those days for under $1,000. An average wage in those days was $2 a day. So if you were spending $3,500 on a house, you were spending a good chunk of money for a house. So that meant that the house was very well built, because the contractors had a very good reputation for high quality buildings, but also a lot of the fixtures that they would have then put in would be the upper style, moldings, hardwood floors, those kinds of things, because you're building something that you wanted as a showpiece to show that you were doing very well in the community. Unfortunately, just after Red Deer became a city and this area was just really starting to catch on. The First World War broke out, the boom broke, and Red Deer went through a long period of no growth and slow economic times. The Willsons themselves, they moved down to California because the Micheners had started developing business interests in California with orchards and that sort of thing, and the Willsons moved down there to be part of that as well. Eventually they sold the house to a family by the name of Carskellen. Mr. Carskellen had a store in Red Deer. They did reasonably well. And then Mrs. Snyder took it over. Mrs. Snyder had a large old house on 54th Street downtown that she had used, taking in senior citizens and running as a form of private nursing home. But she needed more space, so she bought this house and converted it into what she called Grandview Villa, which was a seniors care facility. And in fact, actually, she had so many residents here that it became actually somewhat overcrowded. Then, when the Kiwanis Club was formed in Red Deer, they built the Twilight Lodge, which was the first seniors lodge built in Alberta. And that kind of really eliminated demand for a private nursing home facility for seniors, such as what Mrs. Snyder had done. So in the last 20-some years, because the house is basically very sound, very well built, has a lot of very nice features, you've had a number of about 3 or 4 owners the last while who've taken over, who have very carefully renovated the place. You know, they've taken out the plaster and plath, they've upgraded electrical and plumbing, but they've also been very careful to keep the moldings and a lot of the other features that show that this is a well-built historical home. And it's in recognition of that. There haven't been that many buildings in Red Deer in the last few years designated as historic sites, but this is one that has been designated. If you go down on the 43rd Avenue there, you can see the historical designation sign, and it's a reflection of not only is this a beautiful old house, it has a lot of history connected to it, and it's something that the community as a whole takes a great deal of pride in.